who are saddled with high student loans from their years of study.
Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, our debt reduction program has similar objectives to that in New Brunswick's new tax rebate program. The premise or the basis upon which New Brunswick has done that, according to what I read, was that it was intended to promote post-secondary education, make it more affordable and accessible, and also the other benefit was to encourage the skilled and newly educated people to remain in New Brunswick. And the goal of our new debt reduction program, the one that was announced, I guess, 2 years ago now, was the same.
Halifax Clayton Park on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, when this government took over, they cut the $9.9 million student loan remission program. The Tories axed this program completely and left students with absolutely no student debt relief. Then, just before the 2003 election, they found the will to introduce a half-hearted program to pay lip service to the needs of Nova Scotia post-secondary students. My question to the minister is, with a record of cutting programs and bringing them back at half strength, what, if anything, does this government plan to do to encourage graduates to stay and work in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's well worth noting that the honourable member did acknowledge that our program was announced, introduced over 2 years ago, and probably it's the fact that New Brunswick did follow our lead. However, I can say that through the debt reduction program, a student in Nova Scotia who stays and works in Nova Scotia meets the criteria in combination with the Millennium Scholarship can have about 60% of their Nova Scotia student loan forgiven or worked off.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, there are a number of points that need to be mentioned. I think what the minister is telling us is that New Brunswick saw what this government did and raised them by 10. Yeah, you have. In New Brunswick, there is a 15-year guarantee for this program. It continues that long. They've made a long-term commitment to students. In Nova Scotia, you have to apply. In New Brunswick, it comes off your income tax. I think there's a lot of differences between the two programs and a lot more. In fact, New Brunswick is the only one in Canada that's had a program of this nature. So my question is, New Brunswick has shown innovation and leadership in addressing the needs of post-secondary students. Why is this government content to let New Brunswick lead the way in recruiting and retaining young graduates while we in Nova Scotia are doing nothing?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I will go back to what I said in the previous question. Clearly, New Brunswick followed our lead. I would also remind the honourable member is that the memorandum of understanding that was signed between this government and the Nova Scotia University is the first and widely acknowledged as being a leader in the financing instability and the financing of higher education.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Community Services. 2 days ago, I asked the Minister about problems being...
Order, please. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth North has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 days ago, I asked the Minister about problems being faced by people with disabilities in this province with trying to find employment. The best response this Minister could muster was to tell us all about the wheelchair recycling program targeting youth who are yet not in the workforce. Mr. Speaker, this project does nothing to help persons with disabilities find jobs. So I ask the Minister again, why does this government continue to inadequately fund programs that would help disabled persons or help persons with disabilities in seeking employment?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for allowing me to continue on the things that we have done as a government in this regard. And indeed, on Tuesday, I could have well talked about the new multilateral framework that's been signed with the federal government, between the federal government and the provinces and territories, to expand what was the former Employability Assistance Program for people with disabilities. It enhances the program, and we're pleased to see that the federal government upped their cap a little bit, and we're more than happy to make the matching contribution, Mr. Speaker. A good thing for people with disabilities.
Member Dartmouth North on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, that minister can feel good, but that minister knows that it goes nowhere near addressing the real issue of employable disabled persons. Mr. Speaker, another hurdle being placed in front of Nova Scotians with disabilities is transportation. In Halifax, Accessa Bus had to be booked weeks in advance, and it is very limited. People who must rely on social assistance have to fight tooth and nail to get a bus pass included in their monthly budget as a special need expense. My question to the minister, why is his government department acting in such a miserly manner when it comes to the freedom and independence of persons with disabilities?
Minister of Community Services.
Give me the question. Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I think that while the honourable member has asked a question about transportation, and I spoke about rural transportation last week, what I think the honourable member might like to hear is that on the federal level, now that the child care agreements seem to be falling in place, and of course it depends on who is the federal government in the next couple of months, but the next priority is people with disabilities, and something that has been brought forward by Ontario, which I think that sounds very interesting to me, is to address that gap between when a child becomes a young person and the family loses their national child benefit, and before they become 65 and get old age security. There's a gap in there for people with disabilities, and the talk is about working towards some sort of pension to supplement what's available provincially.
Member Dartmouth North on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, that had absolutely nothing to do with employment. What I asked the minister to do was respect to transportation for disabled persons in the metropolitan area to make sure that the needs of those disabled persons were being met. He said that somewhere down the road, it may be a year, it may be 10 years, it may be 15 years. Mr. Speaker, in recent months, clients of community services have been talking about a review of every person who gets a phone or a bus pass as a special need in the HRM. Many have been told that they may be cut off from receiving a bus pass, and they will have to take the cost out of their $184 a month for food and utilities. My question to the Minister of Community Services is, how can he justify such draconian measures that will ensure disabled persons are prisoners, or will continue to ensure that disabled persons are prisoners in their homes?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the member bringing that up, and I want to assure the honourable member. In fact, I want to ensure all members in this chamber that if they are made aware of that sort of circumstance and they're not able to resolve it with the casework supervisor, I would appreciate it if they would bring those cases to my attention.
Order, please. The Honourable Member for Victoria Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Transportation. Mr. Speaker, it's been brought to my attention by Bert McDonald of the McDonald Road in Scotch Lake that his road was put on a priority list back in 1960, guaranteed again in 1980 to be on a priority list to be paved. 45 years later, Mr. Speaker, it's still not paved. Mr. Speaker, when will this minister do the right thing and pave that road that was put on the priority list?
Order, please. Time allotted for question period has expired. Order, please. Time has expired. Government business, the Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I move that you do now leave the chair and the House resolve itself in the committee of the whole House on supply.
Member for Hants East.
Thank you.
Order, please. The Honourable Premier on point of...
Mr. Speaker,
Premier on point of order.
thank you, Mr. Speaker. On specific instructions, a government official has been required to monitor a TV network over the last 3 hours. He just reported final score: Canada 5, Slovakia 4.
Not a point of order, but a point of interest, I suppose. The Honourable Member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Point of disorder. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to use my 15 minutes going into supply to speak about health care and not necessarily specific to my constituency, but I may touch on a few points there. But I'm more concerned around the issue of health care nationwide, and in particular how that impacts on Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I think poll after poll indicates that health care is the number one concern for Canadians. And I would say that this is an item, I think a ball that's volleyed back and forth by political parties whenever they see fit to do so. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that I am particularly concerned about the ability of this country to go down the road of privatization of health care. And I think that there are members in this House who are old enough to remember what it meant to pay for health care, and I am not one of them, Mr. Speaker. Although it would seem to me that in 1956 that we didn't have Medicare or public health care, but my memory of that until it came in the 60s is pretty vague. So for me, the only system that I can ever remember, Mr. Speaker, is a publicly funded health care system. And I think that because Canadians, by and large, the majority of Canadians, are getting of an age where they don't remember a time when there wasn't publicly funded health care, then they tend, I think, to a point to take it for granted and tend to think that another system may be just as good. And I'm somewhat worried about the direction of the federal government and of provincial governments as well, Mr. Speaker. They've always seemed to have taken the view, we hear it in this House, about the costs of health care. And I remember when the present Minister of Education was the previous Minister of Health, and I think during budget estimates, he was trying to make the case that health care costs were increasing by 13% per year. And I asked the minister how much of the health care budget was salaries, and he said it was 80%. 80% of the health care budget in Nova Scotia was salaries. And I asked him then if there was any group working in the healthcare system that had received a 13% increase in their wages. And he said no, there wasn't, and I knew there wasn't. Matter of fact, I wasn't sure if I could remember any that had gone much above 3%, and if there was any that went to 7%. But so if healthcare costs, if 80% of healthcare costs is salaries, and those costs are not going up by 13% per year, then the question would have to be, could the other 20% possibly be increasing by such a great amount as to drag that healthcare budget to a point where it increases by 13% per year? And I have to say, Mr. Speaker, I'm not convinced that no one has actually been able to address that. Now, we heard in the House today that it's even going up now by 9%. So in other words, we've gone from 13%, I think a couple of years ago it was 11%. I heard the member for Richmond, I think, used the figure 9% today, 9.3%. So the proportion of the budget that that department is consuming is shrinking, and that can only be as a result of two things. I mean, either you're cutting health care, more and more every year, or that the provincial budget is increasing by so much every year that as a proportion, those dollars are becoming less and less. But one concern that I have, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that I think for successive years, the federal government has not funded health care in this country appropriately. And when I say that, I say it in terms of what other areas the federal government will fund and the priority of those other concerns in relation to the priority of health care to Canadians. And I believe that the federal government is interested in some privatization of health care, and that worries me. And I think that Nova Scotians, I think that Canadians generally, if you underfund the system, if you continue to have wait lists and what appears to be a dysfunctional system, that it'll get to the point where it'll be so bad that Canadians would say, I don't care how I get it, I'd be willing to pay for it. Well, Mr. Speaker, this is a particularly dangerous road to go down, and I think that members of the House, of this House of Assembly, and maybe there are members who have far more knowledge, far more personal knowledge of a system that is user pay, but I have friends in South Dakota, and I talk to them a couple times a year. And actually something I didn't know, Mr. Speaker, was that when you reach 65 in South Dakota, that there is a public system. There is a system that will pay for your health care, but not before 65. And the friends that I have, the couple that I know, the wife is about 58 years old. Her health is not so good as good as she would like to have it. And presently, Mr. Speaker, she buys health insurance. And her health insurance is $700 a month in the United States, in South Dakota. So for her, and for them, actually, and these are people, you know, she's 58 or 59 years old, her husband is 65, or older than 65. Now, these are people who are getting to a stage in their life where, you know, more of a fixed income, their ability to generate income is not as great as it would be for younger people. And so here they are at a stage in their life where it would be very important, I think, the same as it would be for any Canadians of that age, that you like to get some debt behind you, and you're thinking that these next few years might be somewhat easier. But excuse me, here is a case of one member of the family, Mr. Speaker, who has an insurance bill of $700 for health insurance. Now, if both these individuals were under 65, then there would be obviously an increase in that. And I think that in the same way that Nova Scotians can think about auto insurance or any other insurance, home insurance that they buy, and the one thing I think about auto insurance, I pay it in the hopes that I'll never need it. In other words, if I use it, I'm going to pay more. The more that you require the insurance system to cover your costs if you have damage to your vehicle, well, then you know that your rate's going to go up or your premiums are going to go up. So you say to yourself, you know, I need to have it, I have to pay it, and I hope to God I'll never have to use it. And this is exactly the situation for this woman that I know, that she's quite concerned about her own health, and she doesn't want to use the healthcare system simply because the cost of her insurance is getting to a stage where it's getting to be more difficult for her, Mr. Speaker. And so, you know, she's worried that her $700 a month is going to increase and get to the point where she's not going to be able to afford health care coverage. And I think that because Canadians are not particularly aware of the American system, they're not really paying attention because we have a public system, and they they're used to it. They don't give a second thought to when they go into a hospital. You know, the first person they don't run into is someone asking how they're going to pay for their service. And I think that they're not aware of the makeup of that system. I think actually when Canadians think about privatized health care, I think they think that they'll go in and write a check, $100 or whatever, and they'll still get the same service. They don't understand the thousands of dollars that they'd have to pay, Mr. Speaker, in order to get these services. And actually, in the United States, there's approximately 30 million Americans that have no health care coverage. My leader, I think, mentioned yesterday about the June was the date that the health care that would have been provided for low-income people, the gratuitous health care, that budget was used up, you know, sometime in June. So that meant at that hospital there was, you know, for 6 months, basically for the year, there was absolutely no way for any low-income people to get health care. So I think that it's important that Canadians be very much aware, Mr. Speaker, of this slippery slope that they will go down if they allow privatization of health care. And I think in the context of international agreements that we signed, and NAFTA in particular, that if we allow this in our country, then we have to allow American companies to come in to provide health care as well. We can't do for one and not for the other under those agreements. And so this is very worrisome. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, people don't recognize that the American system actually is unsustainable because of the fact that as the cost increases and as more people fall out of the system, in other words, you know, when the cost gets to the point that you can't afford your health care coverage, you leave the system, that leaves fewer people paying. And because fewer people are paying, Mr. Speaker, the price will go up, their costs will go up, and it's a never-ending spiral. And actually, part of the reason why I think during the Romano Commission that there were presentations from the U.S., there were presentations from England. People said, you have a good system, just fund it. And I would say that, you know, a couple of years ago we heard of Bombardier getting $1 billion from the federal government, and for the company, plus they got $1 billion so they could offer low-interest loans to their customers to buy their product. And Romano was saying, put $2 billion into health care. And that's when I questioned about the priorities, Mr. Speaker. If we can give $2 billion to one corporation in this country when health care requires $2 billion, then I say this is a system that's definitely affordable, and I would like for Canadians to pay more attention to the health care system they have and the threat that it's under, and I thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. The honourable member from Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's certainly a pleasure to rise in my place speaking into supply to raise some points regarding the county of Richmond, which, Mr. Speaker, March 24th of this year, surprisingly to me, marked my 7th year of having the distinction of and the honor of being able to serve the people of Richmond County, having been elected in 3 general elections, and we've seen a great deal of success, a great deal of challenges in Richmond, but it's truly my belief that in those 7 years we are currently certainly in a better economic situation than we were back when I was first elected, as our county has been able to overcome numerous challenges along the way. Just earlier, Mr. Speaker, you'll remember I tabled a resolution honoring and recognizing the retirement of Clarence Landry, a longtime manager of St. Joseph's Credit Union. If I have the figures correct, that credit union, which serves the community of Petit-de-Gras and some surrounding areas of Ile-Madame, is one of the only standalone credit unions left in the Strait area. As you'll recall, most of them merged under the East Coast credit unions, but the St. Joseph's decided to stay on its own. And what a leader that credit union has been through these difficult times. one of the most telling parts of it is that through the downturn of the fishery and the downturn in our local economy, in 1989, they had assets valued at $9 million. In 2004, if I'm not mistaken, and the clerks can confirm with the resolution, I believe their assets had risen to $29 million. Now, Mr. Speaker, that is a significant accomplishment. And through that, I certainly recognize some of the numerous efforts that they have undertaken along the way. Mr. Speaker, Richmond County continues to be heavily dependent and blessed with rich natural resources. Currently, Tuesday, May 10th, was the opening of the lobster season for the lobster fishing areas around Richmond County. And I am pleased to report to you, Mr. Speaker, that although we underwent many, many years of poor lobster catches, to the point where fishermen were coming in with 50 pounds, 100 pounds, and less after passing 275 traps, I'm pleased to report that the first day of landings was certainly very favorable in Richmond County, with landings in excess of 1,000 pounds, and we certainly hope that that is going to continue for the entire 2-month season, and that this will again be a very successful year for lobster fishermen in Richmond County. Mr. Speaker, we are also looking forward to the opening of the snow crab season. As you know, snow crab has certainly played a major role in the rebuilding of our economy in Richmond County. Not only have many of our permanent license holders been able to see an increase in their quotas, an increase in the price, but we have also, in Richmond County, I'm proud to say, been able to have the additional processing of crab take place, which has created more jobs in Richmond County. We do have right now a crab processing facility, which is known as Petit de Gras Packers, which processes snow crab. It is in operation right now. It started its operations, I believe, a few weeks ago. And Mr. Speaker, I can tell you there are over 80 people employed at this facility, and there are many spin-off jobs as a result. That facility, Mr. Speaker, is expected to process in the millions of pounds of crab again this year, which is going to create employment, I said, from about 2 weeks ago, so let's say late April, and will probably continue either till the end of September or October. I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that that value-added processing has made a big difference to our communities, and I think it's something that the Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries should be encouraging to take place in many of the other communities in Nova Scotia that have a vibrant crab fishery. Mr. Speaker, one of the other businesses that has been doing extremely well, quite ironically, the business is situated on the site where our old fish plant used to be. Richmond Fisheries, also known as Boot Fisheries, that used to employ up to 500 people, that basically was demolished in 1994, 1995. It was flattened during the collapse of the groundfish fishery. The draggers disappeared, and then the plant disappeared. But I'm pleased to say that on its site now is found a modern shipbuilding repair facility with a travel lift, which is now employing not only employees of Sampson Enterprises, which is the main company, but is also using a lot of local contractors that are being brought in to service a number of vessels. A great deal of them are native vessels, and also they have quite a few vessels from the Canadian Coast Guard, which is also being able to add a great deal to our economy and create economic development in our community, which in this case is located on Ilma Dam. Mr. Speaker, if we look a little bit further in our whole county, we have the Point Upper Industrial Park, one of the most vibrant and economically important industrial parks in this province. Mr. Speaker, many people tend to confuse the industries that are located in this park with believing that they are in Port Hawkesbury. And in some cases, the names of some of these industries would lead one to draw these conclusions. But the fact is that they are actually in Richmond County, and we're quite pleased to host them, and more importantly, quite pleased that they pay their tax dollars to Richmond County. Stora Enso's official name, much to my chagrin, is called Stora Enso Port Hawkesbury. But they are not in Port Hawkesbury. They are in Point Upper, Richmond County. Port Hawkesbury is certainly the nearest town, and many of its employees come from Port Hawkesbury. Many come from Richmond, Inverness, Guysborough, Antigonish. But Stora is situated in that Point Upper Industrial Park. And as you'd be aware, Mr. Speaker and members of this House, Stora has been undergoing a great deal of changes, as there's been changes in the newspaper market in the last number of years. There are too many mills right now in North America producing newsprint and not enough demand to sustain the amount of mills that are in operation. As a result of that, we see that there has been some downsizing at that facility, unfortunately, but that is one of the realities. But to this day, they still maintain a workforce at the facility of over 500 people, and the spin-off jobs, which includes truckers, people working in the woodlots, and some of the other industries that are directly impacted, makes them certainly that they continue to be the most important employer. I would argue not only to Richmond County, but to the Strait area, and I'd go so far as to say the most important employer in Cape Breton Island, because I would say that their payroll certainly surpasses any other payroll that there is on Cape Breton Island from any one single employer. Speaker, we are also home to Scotia Terminals. Scotia Terminals, which is both a loading and offloading and a storage facility for different types of fuels. It used to be the old Gulf Oil, the Gulf Oil refinery. And when that refinery was abandoned in the late 70s, early 80s, the tanks, the holding tanks, were kept in place. And Scotia Terminals has managed to keep those so that large tankers that are coming in from Europe are able to come into Scotia, unload their load of fuel, it is stored, and then smaller tankers come in, pick up that fuel, and for the most part service the eastern seaboard of the United States. They continue to be a major employer as well, and they have certainly indicated some exciting possibilities for the future, which we hope will come through. Speaker, we are also in that Point Upper Industrial Park home to one of Nova Scotia Power's generating plants. Now, recently, Nova Scotia Power undertook, I believe it was a $24 million upgrade to its wharf facilities. Prior to this, Nova Scotia Power was having to have their coal unloaded down in Sydney. It was then shipped by rail to the facility. Later on, they decided to have the coal dropped off at Porcupine Mountain and then brought by rail over to their Point Upper facility. With this new wharf, they can now bring the ships directly to the facility. It is offloaded and then it is stored directly on site. So that's a major investment, again, that was undertaken. We look forward to more investments from Nova Scotia Power at that particular power plant. Now, Mr. Speaker, one of the other major employers that has moved in, and unfortunately, they do find themselves just outside the Point Upper Industrial Park, but they're about as close as you can get, but they are within the boundaries of the town of Port Hawkesbury, much, I'm sure, to the pleasure of Mayor Billy Joe McLean. But EDS currently, I believe, has over 400 to 500 employees. And I can tell you, many of those employees, I would argue probably more than any other county, are from Richmond County. So they do certainly play an important role. It has been able to provide an important income for many families. At the same time, it has helped attract a number of our youth that were considering either leaving our area or who have returned to our area that had experience working in other call centers. So we hope and look forward to EDS's continued presence in the Strait area and continued growth. Speaker, one of the most exciting projects that are upcoming in Richmond County that many members will have heard of is the Anadarko LNG facility. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to see that an agreement was made to purchase the land in question at Bear Head, which also is part of the Point Upper Industrial Park, and that this facility is going to start construction this year. The construction alone is going to create up to 1,000 jobs, and there will be an approximately 40 permanent positions at that facility. Mr. Speaker, it is the possibilities that come with an LNG facility that is even more exciting. Not only that we have that kind of investment in infrastructure and in construction jobs, but it's some of the spin-offs, and I believe you will hear in the months and weeks ahead about some of the exciting opportunities that will come out of this facility. I've enjoyed working with representatives of Anadarko. I look forward to working with them, and what I wish to say again is that while we can sit here as elected officials and thank government, thank business, thank everyone who was involved, what I have been saying all along is, in our case, what we have to thank is the community. It is our residents, because rather than react with fear and react without knowledge, the people of Richmond County have educated themselves, have learned what LNG was, and they have embraced it. While communities in the U.S. and the eastern seaboard have rejected it outright because of terrorist threats and all of these other great fears they have created, the people of Richmond County have learned and have educated themselves to the point that they look forward to this type of facility, and that is exactly why Point Upper is regarded as the heavy industrial park, because we expect heavy industry to locate there. So we're looking forward to that facility. Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to recognize the important work of La Picasse, especially the Conseil de Développement Économique de Nouvelle-Écosse. I do hope that the Minister of Acadian Affairs and the Minister of Economic Development will support this organization, which for the most part has been receiving federal funds. I do hope that they will, this organization can continue because it has done great work in our Acadian communities, and I also want to certainly recognize Yvon Sanson for his work on behalf of that. I know that Edgar Sanson has served, I believe, as Vice President of the board. And I also know that Billy Joyce has been an employee with them as well, working with many of the youth groups in the Acadian communities to assist them towards economic development. And Speaker, for any member who has not yet visited La Picasse, I would encourage them to do so. It certainly is a jewel, and we're certainly very proud to have it in Richmond County. Speaker, we also have the work of community economic development groups such as Development Île-Madame Association that has been recognized internationally for their efforts. We have the L'Ardoise Economic Association for Development, mainly in the river, in the lower L'Ardoise area, and for the efforts that they have put in there. Mr. Speaker, I also want to recognize the municipality of Richmond that has shown leadership in supporting economic development as much as they can, and I do hope the government will review some of the restrictions in the Municipal Governments Act that limits municipalities such as Richmond from playing a bigger role in economic development, because they are under strict rules, and one hopes that the government is willing to review these in order to allow Richmond to continue. Mr. Speaker, we do have challenges, and a lot of successes that I've pointed out. Unfortunately, the province has not been at the table, and I think the members on the government realize that. In Richmond County, we look to ECBC, we look to HRDC, and we look to the federal government, because without them, unfortunately, we do have a rep for Department of Economic Development in the Strait area. We write him a letter. We know what the response is going to be. No funds. That's the reality. And unfortunately, the province has not been a player for a lot of the success. And I hope in raising that they realize there's great success stories there that we'd like them to be a part of. And I hope that they will take those comments under consideration. So, Speaker, I have a few minutes left, and I want to take this opportunity to say, and to publicly say, that Enterprise Cape Breton Development Corporation has been the major player in the economic revival of Richmond County. And I want to take this opportunity to publicly thank Rick Beaton and his staff for the leadership they have shown, for being there as a partner with us, and for investing in our communities. And I have to tell you, when I hear the mayor of CBRM continually undertake attacks against ECBC and personal attacks against Mr. Beaton, and to say that investments have not been made, well, I invite that mayor to come to Richmond County and to see how the federal government has helped us in turn around our economy, how they have made investments, and how they have been there to support us in our efforts. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to have worked with Mr. Beaton. We continue to work on projects. I don't have enough time to list all of the projects that ECBC has helped us fund in Richmond County. I do hope that the province will look to Rick Beaton and ECBC as an example of where the province should be in supporting economic development for communities throughout this province, especially Richmond County. Our communities, especially in Richmond, have not waited for the federal government or provincial government to come with solutions. We have created our own solutions, and we have brought them forward. I'm pleased with the success we have achieved. I look forward to further success in the weeks, months, and years ahead, and I do hope that the province will join us, become a partner in that success, and I look forward to being able to spend at least a few more years in this House of working on behalf of the people of Richmond County so we can continue to move forward together as a county, as an important player in the province of Nova Scotia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Yes, on a point of order.
Government has failed to hold a quorum in the House. I move the House adjourn for the day.
Rod. 3 members just walked in.
Yeah, you can count all the members as they come in.
Okay.
Yes.
And how quickly do they?
Yeah, I can take it at the moment. I can take my time. Yeah. Just have a look around now.
How many do they need for
15.
The government needs 15, counting me,
including you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
and Mace.
15. You got 15.
The honourable member from Preston.
I believe the quorum, if you check the rules, is that at the time I ask for quorum, it's the only people you count, not the people that move afterwards.
I'm familiar with the number for quorum. If I could just have a moment.
You're allowed to count the House, and if by the time you finish counting the House,
I'm advised by the clerk that there is a reasonable period within which people can come into the House. As I was counting through the House, members were coming in. As I count through the House right now, I see that we do have the number for quorum, which is 15, and I appreciate the motion, but the motion is denied. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's my honor to stand for a few moments today and talk into supply. And I just want to follow up on a few comments that the member from Richmond brought forward, and I do want to congratulate a number of people within his community that have stepped up and worked towards making his area a better place. And of course, he did mention as well in his speech was Edgar Sanson, and he does a wonderful job of creating employment within that riding when groundfish stocks were at their lowest. He set up a company to work on crab and lobster, and just set up a phenomenal company now that employs 100 and some odd people within the riding of Richmond. And I do want to congratulate him, as well as 200. The member informs me that it's about 200 people.
Order. If the members are going to come in from the lounge and they may have been having conversations at an earlier time, it would be appreciated if they didn't continue the conversations when they came into the legislature. If they're in the legislature, this is a place for debate. The honourable member for the Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And also Herman Sampson, of course. And I do want to thank Herman publicly in this House for bringing me around Arichat Harbor last summer during the Congrès Mondial Acadien, where we had the opportunity to visit one of the tall ships that was there and of course show off his area, and a very proud one. So I do want to commend the member for being able to represent a riding as good as the constituency of Argyll, because it definitely rival together in being very strong Acadian populations and being very based and grounded in the fishery. I do want to talk a little bit about the budget. It's very proud to be a part of a government that has brought forward a budget that includes such an important thing to me, which is our children, and representing being investments into education, investments into their health and their activity through the Office of Health Promotion. As most of you know, I am the father of two children. Of course, Andre, who is 6 years old, and Alec is just going to be 3 this August. So they're very active little children, and I do hope that will pursue throughout their careers, throughout their lives. Unfortunately, for my sake, is that I probably haven't been as active as I should have been over the last 35 years, trying to turn that around. And I got to say that dieting and that is not all it's wrapped up to be, and I think I've lost myself 2 or 3 times through the course of my career of trying to diet. So I'm hoping that the things that we are going to be bringing forward, the things that we will be teaching our children will allow them to stay fit and healthy and stay off the rolls of health, of hospitals and those types of things throughout their lives. I want to talk a little bit about agriculture and fisheries, if I may, for just a few moments, and about some of the key initiatives that we are trying to bring forward coming up in the next budget. I do want to highlight the Salmon Restoration Project, to talk a little bit about that for a second. Of course, salmon populations, wild salmon populations in the province have been dwindling over the last number of years, and we were trying to find ways to work with the federal government to bring a change in that depopulation. And I think what we've been able to do is come up with a commitment on our behalf of about $500,000 to do salmon enhancements, which is to work on that sports fishery, which does bring about $85 million to the province's economy, and to bring in a biologist and bring in a marketing specialist, and then a bit of money to work with community groups, salmon fishing groups, to enhance habitat and do those types of things. And I know the member for Inverness and the Minister of Tourism does welcome this as some of our one of our probably most lucrative salmon runs right now is, of course, the Margaree, and looking at ways to help enhance that stream, that river, for the future populations of salmon within this province. We also have announced a wonderful initiative in conjunction with the Nova Scotia Agricultural College, the Agritech Park in Truro. We call it the Bioresources Technoventure, and this one here is about a $250,000 project to research new agri-food and seafood products and technologies. And basically the idea on this one is to take the reams of books and research that people have been doing throughout the years, and I've said this on a number of occasions as well, is that this province is based on R&D, research and development, but yet it seems that we never get to the development part, and I think that's what this piece does, is to find marketable things, marketable products that we can add value to our seafood, to our agricultural products within this province, and try to build it for the future. Also, in our budget, we talked about the Orchard Renewal Project, which is a $235,000 project to assist the apple growers within the province of Nova Scotia to help them replant, to take acreage within this province that has been neglected over a number of years, to put in new varieties of apples that are going to grow better, so you get better yields, and of course the apples that sell at a higher price, ones that you can sell more on the fresh market, and get a better price for them. So it does add value, again, of economic development throughout this province. I do want to talk about Argyll for a moment, and of course the region of Argyll, the constituency of Argyll, is a relatively small one with about 9,000 souls in it, basically building around a number of Francophone communities, a number of Acadian communities, mixed in, of course, with a number of English communities as well. So it's a very vibrant area based basically on the fishery. So when one thing doesn't go quite right, the whole riding doesn't go quite right. But right now, I got to say that the riding has been doing wonderful. And I do want to talk about the lobster fishery in my area that is, of course, going to be coming to a close in about a month's time, at the end of May. So I guess that's about 2 weeks' time that the fishery will come to an end. But we had a really hard start to the fishery back in December, where the landings were low, the quality of the lobster was low, and really the landings were low simply because the weather was just so bad that the fishermen were not able to get out and check their traps and do their work there. So what we're seeing now is finally a pickup to the end of the season. We're seeing still a good price for lobster, and we're seeing good quality lobster coming in. So we're hoping that a lot of our tank houses will be able to buy this product and hold it for better prices throughout the summer. So we're very hopeful on that. The other thing that it does is that because we had a sort of slow start, there are a number of things that fall in place. Is that a lot of the fishermen haven't been ordering new boats and those types of things. And I've got 6 different boat shops within my riding. Wedgeport Boats, LeBlanc Brothers Boat Building, Camille Dion Boat Builders, Jimmy D'Entremont, our Bellyboat Construction, and of course Gorham 45. And these guys have been having a hard time lately because they haven't been getting the orders. And they employ, probably each of them employ, something up to 50 people each, if not more, in some of the cases. So, I'm very hopeful that this end of the season will be good, and the orders will pick up, and all these enterprises will be working throughout the summer and into the new year as well. I do want to talk a little bit about yesterday. And yesterday we were able to attend the Southwest or the Yarmouth Hospital Foundation Gala, which was a fundraising event in Yarmouth at the Grand Hotel, where a number of us got to wear tuxedos, and our wives got to wear gowns, which is something that happens all the time in Yarmouth County. But it was a wonderful opportunity to sit and see people and talk. And we had Bruce Rainey there as the supper hour news anchor from Prince Edward Island. Of course, not a Yarmouth native, but a guy that spent a number of years working in radio in Yarmouth. And it was great to see Bruce back in the riding, or back in Yarmouth to do that with his wife, Kendra McGilvery, who got to play some fiddle, and she didn't tell any jokes, of course, about the member for Inverness, because apparently they know each other quite well. But some other date, I'm hoping to have a chat with her and find out some great things about Inverness and about, of course, the member from Inverness. But the MRI was a project that, of course, the Honourable Minister of Natural Resources and I have been able to sit down and really put our teeth in and lobby the Minister of Health to make sure that Yarmouth was one of the sites that would get an MRI. And we're very happy that announcement happened a number of months back. And the Hospital Foundation, which is just a great bunch, the president, Dave Arnberg, just really stepped up to the plate. And so far, they have been able to raise about almost $500,000 towards the purchase of that MRI. Last night, we were able to raise at this gala about $24,000, which was, like I said, a wonderful night where we had a number of options to buy tickets, to have a silent auction, to have a live auction on a number of items there. So very proud to have participated in that last evening. And I just also want to say that coming up, if anyone in this House from Southwest and all across the province would be interested in the Jody Shelley Golf for Health, happens on July 8th, which is a golf tournament. And so I do invite other members to visit Yarmouth and help out our cause. Last summer, I believe, I was lucky enough to host Cabinet and, of course, our caucus in Yarmouth County in Argyll, where we were able to visit le Musée Acadien. We were able to visit the Village Historique de la Nouvelle-Écosse. We were able to also visit the Argyll Township Historical and Genealogical Society, of course, the Tuscott Courthouse and Jail. And after that, I was very, very pleased to announce on behalf of the Minister of Economic Development an investment in their project of $50,000, which was to rebuild the neighboring church, which they're going to be turning into more of the genealogical section, and then converting the jail and that into a real museum. So a wonderful project that's going on there. And Mr. Speaker, I can talk all day, I would suppose, about the constituency of Argyll and all the great people that I have the honor to represent. But in the means of time, and I know I'm coming close to my time, but I do want to thank the House today for allowing me this time to stand up and talk about my constituency. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Time has expired for debate going into supply. A second. We're now in Committee of the Whole House. I recognize the Honourable Member from Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sure we're all familiar with the color of the dot exercises that children like to do in their coloring books. And I believe I have about 23 minutes at the next stage. And what I would like to do is connect some of the dots in terms of my party's concerns about the Department of Community Services budget, and create a picture which I think you'll find is not a very pretty picture. And I would even go so far as to say that in some respects, The picture is going to indicate almost an atmosphere of mean-spiritedness. And the picture, the lines will somewhat be outside the lines. And I guess the reason I'm starting off this way is because this was the point of our motion on Tuesday to take out the minister's salary except for $1. We wanted to bring to the government's attention the degree of dissatisfaction that we had with this particular department and this particular budget. And I'm sure the minister has noticed that much of the so-called debate on the budget estimates around this department has been somewhat one-sided. That is, the opposition members have been expressing their frustration by listing a number of concerns rather than the more traditional back-and-forth dialogue. And this wasn't planned, but I think it indicates a shared level of frustration with what's happening to the most vulnerable in our province. And so I'd suggest that the department may be dealing with numbers and broad policy concerns, but as MLAs in our party, we're seeing and hearing from people who are suffering every day with what the department is doing and not doing. And so to a large extent, I'm actually going to continue this trend this afternoon because I want to get my points across. And I'm not suggesting that the minister and his staff take notes on what I'm saying because I actually will, if I have time at the end, I'll ask some specific questions. The first issue I want to talk about is why after 2 years being the critic for community services, I've reached this level of dissatisfaction and frustration. And I think to some respects it's been a learning process. And I can't help but notice, and when I talk to my caucus colleagues, they have the same experience, that an increasing amount of my casework, my work in my constituency office, is the result of clients or want to be clients of the department having problems with the department. And I'm noticing an increase month after month after month, and it's reached a point now where it forms the majority of the work that I do in the constituency office. And I want to be clear here that I am not attacking the frontline staff in the department. But I think what I've learned over the last year and a half is that those staff members are not allowed to use their common sense. That they're not allowed any flexibility in their decision making. That there seems to be a pressure on some of the top administrators to sort of micromanage. And so the frontline workers are not able to use their experience, their knowledge of the community, their knowledge of the system to best match the needs of the clients with what's available. And yet, if they were allowed to do that, it would save the government money and it would be much more effective. So some of the examples that I'm seeing in my constituency office, a number of low-income citizens not able to get affordable housing. I wasn't sure if the minister was listening, but I hope he is, because this is serious. Other people who come into my office are actually in subsidized housing, but they're having trouble with environmental sensitivities. There's been a lot of deferred maintenance. The housing authorities and other public housing organizations are not able to keep up with the repairs and the renovations necessary for the age of the buildings that these people are living in. There's lots of concerns about high-needs neighbors who are not given the appropriate supports to be in the building with others, and so they're often a risk to both themselves and to the other residents. I get a considerable number of people coming through the door who cannot manage their to live on the amount of money, the rates that are provided by the department. They can't get the basic necessities. In fact, a single employable person in 2003 received only 31% of the poverty line in terms of the department rates. A couple with 2 children had a net income of 57% of the poverty line. And this is an impossible amount to live on. And yet at the same time, when these people try to get a job to supplement so that they're able to provide adequate nutritious food for their children, or perhaps buy Christmas presents or a birthday present, or even send their child in the summer to a church camp, they're penalized by having 70% of their income taken off. I see a lot of people with severe disabilities or suffering mental illness who are on wait lists and can't get into affordable housing or placement in small options or group homes. And I'm hearing more and more about children in the permanent care of the minister who are being transferred out of their home into their mind, where they feel comfortable and loved and well treated. They're being transferred, and the professionals who are dealing with these children, either medical professionals or people who are looking after them, are told the only explanation is they're going to a cheaper placement. And this is incredible, absolutely incredible. Sometimes, in terms of advocating for the people who come into the office, instead of calling head office and saying who I am, I'm an MLA, whatever, I actually try to use the process that's in place that a client of the department would be encouraged to use. So I start with the caseworker, work up to the case work supervisor, and continue on. And just occasionally, I get to experience some of the reality of trying to communicate with the department. For example, first thing in the morning, being on hold for 10 minutes, going through the switchboard. Unavailable personnel. Now, admittedly, people have to be in meetings and have to be about doing their work. But it seems to be, because of the under-resourcing of personnel in the various programs, this seems to, the wait in terms of getting a response back is often longer and longer. Delays in responses. Procedural merry-go-rounds. A small example of what I'm talking about is a constituent who came to me, a person with a disability, who is having a problem getting a medical required dental procedure covered with Quick Card. And as you know, this is the company that's been contracted out to pay for dental procedures. I've been 2 weeks trying to get this small issue resolved. Between 12 and 15 phone calls, and I just found out the other day that we're back to square one, have to start all over again. And I'm thinking, okay, I like to think I know the system a little bit. I know how to get action, facilitate a response. And if I'm having that much trouble, how is a client supposed to get through these procedures? I think that the impact on the client is that they want to give up. They just don't want to pursue what might be a legitimate or well-deserved program or coverage. And so it doesn't surprise me that some of the lists are getting smaller and smaller, because I think the clients and the applicants are just giving up in frustration trying to get some of the benefits to which they are eligible for. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I have a lot of sympathy for the frontline staff in the department. And I know they're overworked and they're overstressed. And yet the budget indicates some significant personnel cuts, and when I get to my questions at the end, I will be interested to know where the other positions are going to if they're being cut in 2 of the large programs. Frontline staff are expected to nickel and dime cost savings for the department when their common sense and their genuine concern for their clients indicate there are more effective ways of dealing with many situations. Another issue that's becoming more obvious is students in post-secondary programs running into financial problems towards the end of the school year. One that comes to mind was a young woman, a single mom, who was within 2 months of graduation from a 2-year community college program. And she just needed a little bit of assistance to help her get through that 2 months. There was every indication that she was going to graduate and every indication that she would get a fairly well-paying job so that she would be independent and be able to support her child. And according to the current regulations, if someone is registered in a post-secondary program as a student and they were not on community services before they started that program, they are not eligible to go in, to receive social assistance. So the advice to this young woman was, quit the program, lose the benefit of the student loan that she had taken out, apply for community services, get on community services, then take out another loan and lose all the benefit of the 1.5 years, 1 3/4 years that she had put into the program. Now, it just makes sense to me that a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of support for a couple of months would have saved a lot of money. Now, as it turned out, this young woman refused to take that advice, and she's looking for other ways to continue on and graduate. The other issue about staff that I want to talk about, and this is something I brought up during last year's estimates as well, there's been lots of correspondence and studies done by unions and employee associations and professional associations and non-government organizations about under-resourcing of personnel within the department. And I won't go into details. I'm sure the minister is very familiar with the impact report. This was produced by the Community Advocates Network in partnership with the Nova Scotia Association of Social Workers. And it certainly documents the human resource levels and worker-client relationships and the difficulties that these are causing clients and staff. Case workload is increased. There's much frustration for recipients and workers. There's no time for social supports, sharing information, giving direction, providing empathy and support. And it often leads to inconsistent information and an interpretation of procedures across this province. The other report that I know the minister's familiar with is the NSGEU Case Load Overload report in 2002. And it again outlines the challenges that staff within the department are facing. In fact, I believe the minister, it was reported on CBC Radio that the minister himself was attending a function where children and youth in care of the minister were, I believe, launching a newspaper, a youth newspaper. And it was mentioned by one of the young women involved in this project that I think perhaps once in the last year that she had seen her caseworker. And so everyone's complaining, from the clients as young as teenagers right up to the organizations representing the workers, and also the community groups and provincial organizations that are working with the department to help them deliver their mandated services. So it's interesting that in this year's budget, the department is cutting 18 full-time positions from the Employment Support and Income Assistance Program, which is, I understand, the largest program in the department, and cutting also 15 full-time equivalents from the housing services. So in my mind, with the additional funding for new staff, it looks as though there's 89 new positions, and later on I'm going to be asking the minister where those positions are going to be located. The other issue I want to talk about is the unfair impact of a lot of the policies on women and children in this province. And what seems to be missing within the department is recognition that government has to make women and children a priority because of the changing demographics in Nova Scotia. And if they don't recognize this, it's not going to just unfairly impact on the women and children who are living in poverty, but it's also going to impact on the economy of this province, because we need to ensure that we have a well-educated and productive workforce in the future that will support the tax base that's necessary for the quality of life, quite frankly, that we all enjoy and we all want to enjoy. But there doesn't seem to be any recognition and sort of proactive approach to the changing demographics. So let me give you an example. In Nova Scotia, Statistics Canada indicate to us that young women and young men are increasingly delaying marriage or choosing not to marry. At the same time, young women are delaying having children, or they're having fewer children. So this results in a declining birth rate. Now, the government has recognized this in one other sense, in terms of their immigration strategy. But there's another side to this issue, and that's recognizing what is happening, why there is a declining birth rate. Some of the reading and research I've done on this issue indicates that some of the factors affecting the declining birth rate are financial insecurity, the expense associated with post-secondary education and training, especially university, and the fact that women have to have higher levels of education to earn an adequate or an equal income to men who have less levels of education. And of course, many graduate with huge debts and are not able to start their families as early as perhaps my generation did. And also the cost of raising children is increasing. Families are smaller and more widespread, so you don't have the family support in the community the way we once did. Often children and their parents live at some distance from grandparents and aunts and uncles and other members of extended family. Although parental leave has been extended, there's still an inadequacy in terms of pay during that parental leave. And last that I'm going to mention, but certainly not least, are the long waiting lists for affordable child care in this province. So it's obvious that we have to address some of these situations, especially through this department, in order to sustain our labor force and our tax base and our quality of life. And so I'm suggesting that the women and children who are being underserved by the department are crucial to any such labor force strategy. And this is going to have an impact on our economy. So I feel that it's really important that those issues be taken seriously and planned for. Otherwise, women and children living in poverty are trapped into that cycle, and they're not able to achieve their potential, and that's not just a loss to them and their families, that's a loss to our whole province. So we can't afford to neglect any of our citizens. They're part of the solution to our economic revival. And so, in my mind, any government that overlooks at best or abdicates its responsibility to a sector of its human resources does so at its peril. There's also the interesting situation. People talk about gender equality, but there's also the issue of gender equity. And that's when something impacts disproportionately on women more so than men. And there's lots of examples of that. Take for example the practice now, or the policy of having day surgery and early hospital discharge. This increases the unpaid caregiving responsibilities for mostly women in this province. Also, the lack of affordable and licensed childcare means that a lot of grandparents are now looking after their children, and I've personally seen the impact of this in the voluntary sector, especially in rural communities, where a lot of older women have had to give up their volunteer activities within community groups because they're now staying home to look after their children, their grandchildren, sorry, because their children could not find licensed childcare within that community. So there's this ripple effect that's happening. It's just not affecting the people involved. It's having an impact, a broader impact on the family, extended family, and the community. The next issue I want to talk about is the lack of strategy to overcome poverty in this province. The 2004 Nova Scotia Child Poverty Report Card indicates that 36,000 children in the province of Nova Scotia live in poverty.
Order. The time for the official opposition has expired. Members of the Liberal Caucus.
Yes, I have a few questions to put forward to the minister, more pertaining perhaps to the area that I represent, and perhaps a bit more indicative of Kings County. At a recent meeting with officials from Community Services held in Middleton, one of the, again, staggering statistics, and just for Kings County, was that the waiting list now for affordable housing has stretched to over 500. We know that one little project has certainly gone on in Middleton, but even that, of course, is one that is really more suitable for what I would call more of a middle-income group of people. So there are some very, very big needs in our area. So right in the area where the minister resides and represents, we have an enormous deficit of affordable housing, and I would like to hear from the minister what his department and his plans are to address a growing issue in the Annapolis Valley.
Thank you. I'll recognize the Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank my colleague from the Liberal Party, Kings West, for his questions, and this is the purpose for the estimates, to get answers as opposed to get up and state positions. Well, let me just qualify that. It's refreshing that in estimates that a member is actually taking advantage of the chance to get some answers, and I'll try to provide them. There is a problem right across the country, and the member is right. There is a deficit, and it was a challenge back in the early 90s when the federal government pulled out of social housing, and again we welcome them back in. The member did make mention to the fact that the first 15 units that were built and are occupied in Middleton are more for middle income. That's a good point, and he's absolutely right, because that project really epitomizes what it was designed to do, and that's something that we have changed in Nova Scotia in the way we're implementing it, and that's one of the reasons why we're using rent supplements to provide the Nova Scotia 50% share for any of these projects. The affordable housing program really was designed as a way of paying down the capital costs of new construction. And it was limited to a total of 50,000 total.
Yes.
Total of 50,000 per unit, which, like, that's the maximum mortgage buy down, which means that the balance had to be covered by the occupants, the new tenants. And that's middle income. It's not really targeted for low income. One would argue that this program was really designed probably more for urban Ontario. And we have made the modifications in Nova Scotia with the flexibility that's been afforded to us by CMHC and the minister to move to the rent supplement approach so that we can target lower income Nova Scotians in need of affordable housing. We know that by doing that, we're not going to create as many new units, but we feel that those that we do create will be going to people that would otherwise have had greater difficulty obtaining accommodation. To the member's question about when is it rolling out, or when are there going to be more announcements, the member might be aware that there is a 24-unit complex for seniors that's currently under construction in New Minas. And I would say that I always appreciate when the recommendations come forward, when there are projects that come forward for Kings County, because I know that it is an area where there is a tremendous demand for affordable housing, and that's why I was very appreciative that my colleagues were so quick to sign Phase 2 of the Affordable Housing Agreement, which actually provides greater scope to address the needs of low-income Nova Scotians. We are assessing the call for proposals that came back from Phase 2, or from the second call for proposals, and I'm looking forward to getting recommendations soon on new announcements. So that is what's going on in terms of the affordable housing program, and if the member's got any more specific questions, I would certainly endeavor to answer them.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if any other areas had been targeted, because I know that if we take a look at the list of people, especially those who are trying to live in the Berwick area, this area has become an important area to help attract people to the valley for the farm labor pool, and we have some migration. Especially, we see a real trend from Newfoundland towards the valley for seasonal employment, as their employment rate is somewhere between 15% and 20%. And I know that through this fall and winter period, numerous calls. In fact, I have a tracking in my office. I could actually give you a number, but I don't have that here with me today. But numerous calls with people who were trying to find family housing. This is a family 3, 4, and 5 who were living in with somebody else as a temporary means. I put in many calls as well to Cobequid Housing, and along with sort of a targeted area like Berwick, where there's an enormous need. Also, the second part of my question then is, how do you work in concert with Cobequid Housing to try to wrestle some of the housing needs that we have in this area, and by extension, of course, across the province?
Thank you, member, and recognize the Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The first part of your question was, what about other areas of Kings County? And we look to the rental proposals to be generated by either municipality, nonprofit organizations, can be commercial, and we assess it based on the value that we think it provides to people in need of affordable housing, and again, using the income criteria as one of the important ones, because I want to make sure that we capture low-income Nova Scotians as well as others that perhaps would benefit from the mortgage buy-down that comes through the federal capital contribution, and provincially we supplement the rents of lower-income Nova Scotians. So I guess to answer your question, is a certain amount of it is generated by the community, which proponents will step up to the plate and put in an application, and based on the demand in Kings County, that's a good place for people to be submitting applications. And if you know of nonprofit organizations, or the town wants to get involved with this, or whoever wants to come forward with a good proposal that can stand up against the criteria to deliver good value, we would be pleased to consider those proposals. And honourable member, because it's in the Valley, I'd be delighted to attend any such announcements with the member from Kings West. So I hope that happens. You were asking about Cobequid housing. There are 7 housing authorities in the province. Cobequid is in the central area, and the reason that we have some units in the Annapolis Valley, indeed spread all over the province, is that there used to be the Native and Rural Housing organization called GIGNU. And actually, because of insurance concerns and the fact that they were no longer able to get insurance, by agreement, their stock got rolled into the Cobequid housing stock. Now, we are now in the process of divesting that across the 7 regional housing authorities, so that in future, if a unit is in Kings County, as an example, it will be managed under the Annapolis Valley Regional Housing Authority. But if that answers the question, is how in the world did Cobequid Housing get involved with renting units in Kings County?
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the sessions held on homelessness this year in the Valley was held in Middleton, and it was well attended, and it pointed out certainly some of the needs that do exist in our area. On that occasion, there were several people who said they would lobby hard to the Department of Defense in particular to have a strong look at the housing that existed at 14 Wing Greenwood that has started to be dismantled over the last number of years. Now, generally speaking, from local contractors and people in the area, in fact, who have actually won some of the tenders to take down these buildings, all conclude that this housing stock is certainly in pretty good condition. And I was one of the people who wrote the minister, met with people at 14 Wing Greenwood, and while I got their response, I'm just wondering if the minister and his department did any lobbying for this housing, or felt that it could complement and work towards solving some of the problems that we have in this area.
Thank you, member. The Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to commend the member for his interest and involvement in that area. I did have a conversation with, I believe it was the executive director of KAYAK, that's Child and Youth Action Committee, which is an interdepartmental creation that is trying to deal with some of the youth issues, which also includes, of course, access to affordable housing. And I was very impressed with this woman that approached me. She certainly had done her homework. She also spoke passionately about the opportunity that was there, and I made the connection between her and the department and encouraged a rapport. But you're right. I think that the first decision is that the Department of National Defense has to basically put off the stay of execution on those buildings before we can go anywhere. But we are receptive to an approach from from that community.
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member for Kings West.
Chair, the last question regarding housing is a very, I guess, specific one. In that, in the Waterville area, where there is seniors' apartments located on Maple Street. I'm trying to think of the name of that group of houses there now. It'll come to me here momentarily. But in those complexes, for some reason or another, there seems to have, I guess, the acceptance into those units of families as well as seniors. In other words, mixed age groups and so on, that has led to a number of problems for that sort of seniors and older community there. And I'm just wondering, why is such a development allowed, which we know in this case not only has the potential, but in fact a very unsettling set of circumstances has been going on for a period of time. And I'm just wondering, how department policy or lack of implementing a policy of there allows for such a situation to arrive, which makes it certainly a very disconcerting and unsettling one for the residents there. In other words, I, as an MLA, certainly felt that when I was getting calls, receiving calls about the number of complaints and so forth, and I did have to register them with authorities fairly strongly. But I'm just wondering why that situation is allowed to unfold.
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, thanks to the member for bringing up really a very important question that allows me to speak a little bit about public housing and some of the challenges and opportunities that we face with our current stock. We know that there are waiting lists for public housing, affordable housing, but that does not mean that every unit in the province is occupied. In fact, there are some units where we have chronic vacancies. In the case of a seniors unit, we will not consider anybody under the age of 58 unless it's exceptional circumstances. A chronic vacancy is one such case. And in those cases, if it's determined that we're not going to be able to rent it to a senior, again, somebody that is age 58, it's strange how 58 seems to be younger and younger every year I get older, we will consider applicants from other people, and the members referencing some families have actually showed up in these units. But before that is allowed to go forward, we do send a caseworker, a social worker in to evaluate them, to try to determine compatibility. That information goes back to the housing authority, which actually makes the decision on who occupies their premises. It's up to them to make the decision to allow somebody underneath the age of 58 in. So that's how it comes about, and it's to address chronic vacancy and a social need. And if you've got available units and you're not using them, then you try to do something that's compatible with the existing tenants, and occasionally, regardless of the tenant's age, you're going to find situations where people don't always get along in the same building. And I think what the member is saying is that, unfortunately, that seems to be the case, at least with one of these families.
Thank you, Minister. The member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, for that explanation. One of the, again, the deficiencies in the area that has come to my attention a couple of times in the past year is appropriate housing and programming for youth with mental challenges, and I'm in particular thinking of older children with severe autism that are no longer able to be handled or provided programs within the school system. And I've had two families that have had to take their children to Yarmouth. And I'm wondering if these programs are delivered on a regional basis. Is there some way in which there can be a better array of services available, for example, again, through the Annapolis Valley? When circumstances like this arise, it's an enormous challenge to the family who already have difficult circumstances to deal with around their child, but then when they have to try to work out something with an employer to take their child to Yarmouth on a Monday morning, go down for them, and bring them back on Friday. And I'm just wondering if there is any planning for services that indeed could be delivered locally in cases like this.
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Again, Honourable Member, you bring up good questions. In terms of servicing families that have children with special needs, or youth, I guess in this case, really, we're talking about that have special challenges. It depends on the severity of the challenge. In the case of those that are not able to live on their own, and I'm not sure that's where the member's going with this necessarily, but I don't think it's exclusive of this area as well. We do now have the Direct Family Support Program, which basically empowers financially the family to work out a plan with the caseworker for that son or daughter as to what needs should be met in the home, and we will actually give the family a check for that amount, and they purchase those services. So in fact, that would definitely bring it closer to home. Now, for the less challenging cases, but ones that still present problems for the family, we actually have an extra $1 million in this year's Child Welfare Services budget, specifically to assist families with those kinds of challenges, and we recognize the problem, and this is our way of trying to bring some resources forward. But with every client comes in unique circumstances, and that's one of the beauties of being in community services. As a staff member, it gives you some flexibility in trying to help your clients, but it also comes with some challenges. Everyone is a little bit unique, and they need their own plan.
Thank you, Minister. The member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. One of the areas that I brought up today in my resolution that certainly was impressed upon us very strongly by the poverty group, an interfaith group, the Coalition for Poverty for Consultation Group, and they talked about, and I'm sure perhaps every member here in the House has in fact come across circumstances where a telephone is considered a necessary item towards helping their cause, helping themselves, especially with employment issues. We know that it is there for those that have medical issues and a very basic service. And I'm wondering if the department is given serious consideration to that kind of lifeline in some cases, and to that service that can in fact empower people on community assistance to have better opportunity for work. We know how difficult and cumbersome it is. I've heard from people on provincial assistance who said that this was a real obstacle to exploring job possibilities that came along on short notice. They couldn't receive messages. They had things lined up with a neighbor that would sometimes fall through. And yes, it is a cost, there's no question, but I'm just wondering whether the overall benefits, in my view, today is that this is really a basic necessity, and I'm wondering if the department is trying to move in a stronger direction towards having that as one of the inclusions in household support.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank the member for his question. I erred in where we put that $1 million in the department in my previous answer. It is in the Services for People with Disabilities section. I suggested it was in Child Welfare Services. I apologize. The organization of which you spoke, which in my mind is Elizabeth Brown, and some other very caring people and a lot of people involved with the church, are one of the groups that I would say has been a joy to get to know as minister, and I've certainly appreciated their perspective that they brought forward. Your question specifically was about the opportunities for clients to have a telephone, and maybe even more specifically as a means to help them get a job, launch a career. There is some discretion in the Employment Support Services section so that the caseworker could allow that to happen. And one of the things that I think is very important in the Department of Community Services is that discretion be maintained with the frontline caseworkers, the staff. And so it is a tool that's available to them, but I would acknowledge that it is not given to everybody. And the total cost of providing telephones to all social assistance recipients is somewhere in the vicinity of $12 million. And I think that my track record has been focusing on the basic personal allowance. And if I was given an extra $12 million, you would probably see it go first into basic personal allowance and shelter. But on selected cases where deemed appropriate by the caseworker for that purpose or for medical concerns, clients can get the cost of a telephone added to their budget.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Kings West.
My last question is around the supports for alternate living, and that's a recent program where families who made the choice to have a challenged young adult direct family support. And I know last year it was introduced, and I was just sort of wanting, I guess, a little bit of an update. I've had a couple of families who were certainly wanting to have this as part of their means of going forward, that wanted to keep their young adults in their home. And I would like a little bit of an update as to how that program is unfolding, what kind of participation is being involved with that particular program. I think it has wonderful merits associated with it, and however, I was just wondering how its execution was actually now being, I guess, taking place within communities, within families, because there are those who do make that kind of decision that, in fact, their young adult is going to remain with them, and they're going to work for different degrees of independence until as long as they are able to support them, and until they are are physically and mentally able to handle such children. I've seen a real commitment from families in this area. However, many were reaching frustration that they weren't able to put together a program from Monday to Sunday that would be integrated with the community, a possible workplace, also some respite care. And I think this program does have the possibility of meeting many of those needs. So I'd like for the Minister to comment on degrees of participation, degree of implementation of this program.
Thank you, Member. The Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate the member's interest in the Direct Family Support Program, and he described it well, the purpose. There has been a number of applications across the province, or a great deal of interest, I guess I would say, across the province, and we are busy accepting more people into the program. That is where we've got that extra $1 million. The member spoke of helping youth with challenging youth previously, and that $1 million I spoke of is in fact targeted to that area. I asked whether we had any current numbers today because I'm pretty interested in the numbers, and okay. And I have a very outdated briefing note here, which I think we'll pass on and see if we can get some current answers, because I'd also like to see how we're making out in terms of uptake. It's a very important program.
Thank you, Minister. Member.
And I plan to share my time with my colleague from Victoria the Lakes.
Okay, I'll recognize the Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Minister, for accepting the questions and what I'm about to propose to you. The question that some of the questions that I will be asking are as a result of calls that come into my office. And Mr. Minister, one current problem that seems to need to be resolved is the fact that when community service clients visit sometimes a doctor, but mostly a dentist, the policy states that the client or the social service recipient must pay 20% of the cost. But the problem that exists is that community services, the amount that they pay is based on older costs. For example, if somebody has to get a tooth extracted, for round figures, we could say that if the cost is $100 5-10 years ago, then community services will pay that $100 and the client would pay the $20. But what's happened since is that the cost, the billing of the dentist is going to be at today's rates. So today's rate could be $200, and the client expecting to pay $20 doesn't have the $40 to pay and are left with a cost that they can't recover. And I'm just wondering if there's any way that you could address that for me, please.
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you. And there's two parts to the answer. First of all, before the Employment Support and Income Assistance Program, basically dental did not exist for social services. Since that time, we now spend over $2 million a year on dental. So that's a move in the right direction. But I'm advised that the Dental Association has not requested an increase in their rates under QuickCard, which is the organization that administers our dental program.
A bit of milk, just. No, don't put any.
Or an increase then.
4.15.
Yes. Thank you, sir. I would like to spend a few moments and talk about rent subsidies that are paid to landlords, and it appears that the landlords know what the subsidies are, And usually clients of social services, not all, but some, wind up in financial difficulties, maybe have a poor record of bill payment, or are delinquent in some areas of their financial situation, and therefore do not have a good financial record. The landlords know this, and these clients wind up paying inflated rent to these landlords, and a lot of them in the area are not really up to standard apartments. And what I'm wondering is, rather than paying inflated rents to landlords with not the best of housing accommodations, why wouldn't the province see fit to build more rental unit, more low rental units for the clients that they serve?
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, Honourable Member, a good question. The way that we administer the rent supplements, the existing rent supplements, that's the $2.6 million that is currently shown separately in the estimates, is that the housing authorities basically monitor what value is being returned to the clients, the tenants, and they're the ones that make the determination that the appropriate landlords that are providing good value get the rent supplements. Under the affordable housing program, it works a little bit differently, because there you've got a hybrid typically with new developments which are just, as you know, being rolled out. And in that case, you typically have a what I call a mortgage buy-down, which is the federal government's 50% share, which brings the rates down for everybody in the unit. And then over and above that, the province will allocate a certain number of rent supplements, so that the maximum that people pay is 30% of their income, and that those particular rent subs are, of course, attached to the unit, because that was part of the agreement with the proponent before they start with constructing the new project, the new buildings.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Mr. Minister, I'd like to talk about not enough daycare seats. I guess there never really is enough, but what's come across my desk is the fact that you have daycare seats, and people who are on assistance can apply and have these daycare seats, but sometimes you'll have a parent and acquiring a subsidized seat, and maybe you've got a delinquent dad, and the parent when the applicant is made to get a daycare seat, there doesn't seem to be enough investigation as to the mom has one or two children, or whatever the case may be, but there doesn't seem to be any investigation in the possibility of getting some maintenance paid by the dad, whether he be delinquent or not. But if it's not investigated, then you have somebody who is getting a subsidized seat, who, if the financial end of it was investigated a little bit more, the dad could probably provide the financial assistance, and it would be a paid seat. That would leave or free up a subsidized seat for somebody who legitimately qualifies for it. Can you give me some information on that?
Thank you, Member. The Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Part of that falls under the Department of Justice, because it's maintenance enforcement. That's outside of the Department of Community Services, but clearly we all want to see the other parent, the non-custodial parent, contribute towards the upbringing of their child or children. Should that person also be a client of community services, and the other parent, probably the father, is behind in maintenance payments, arrangements can be made so that we basically guarantee that they will get their maintenance payments, with the idea being that when they eventually come in, that will pay off the advance from community services, or if they don't come in, then it's not treated as an overpayment on behalf of the client.
Thank you, member. The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Mr. Minister, another problem that has been prevalent in my office is the availability in Cape Breton of vacant units, yet the vacant units are not accessible to the people who are looking to occupy them because they've been vacant for quite some time, and they remain vacant because of the lack of having them refurbished, repainted, brought back up to standard where they can be reused again by new clients. So therefore, there appears to be several areas where people are looking for housing. There are vacancies, but until that unit has become refurbished, it's not available for habitation, and that way the person is left out in without proper housing, and yet a unit is available. And I'm just wondering why the delay in the refurbishing units when the clients move out or units become vacant.
Thank you, member. The Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And there's a number of scenarios that might fit what the member is describing here today. One may be that there may not be sufficient demand in the area, and so this is your chronic vacancy, because again, we do have units in some parts of the province which we're not able to fill. You know, people are just not looking to move in them. But for those where there is a waiting list, and perhaps the member is referring to this, I would point out that last year, when we had some good operating results early on, we put an extra $1 million into maintenance for the housing authorities, and then with the strategic infrastructure funding, the $11 million that became available in November, we actually put an additional $4 million into the various housing authorities, with this approximate breakdown: $2 million interior, $1 million interior maintenance, $1 million exterior maintenance, and $1 million was earmarked for things like elevators and emergency generators. So it's a place where we do like to invest more resources, and when given the opportunity, we were quick to make that a priority.
Thank you, Minister. The member for Victoria Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Something that I like to promote in any and all departments, and sometimes it could resolve a lot of situations rather quickly, and that's the lack of flexibility in policy. Flexibility at the local level, because the one-size-fits-all never works properly. And there's people that, because of varying circumstances, I'm just wondering if local decision-making could be allowed in areas, especially in community services, and I'd like to see it allowed in a lot of other areas. But flexibility simply because of the diversity of problems, and then it appears you kind of take an average, create a policy and say, yeah, this should be good for most of the population, or maybe 90% of the population. But it's that 5 or 10% that come out of the woodwork with the most dire needs or extreme circumstances, and they just don't seem to fit the mold. And I'm wondering if there's a move afoot that you would allow local managers, or whatever they're properly called, area managers, regional managers, but somebody on a local level that could deal with the caseworker personally and give the caseworker permission to resolve that situation and then maybe forward a report on to the minister's office.
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you again for your question, Honourable Member. Mr. Chair, through you, the department decentralized services a few years ago with the idea that we put more authority in the hands of the local casework supervisors and the regional administrators. The regional administrators in the Department of Community Services really have enormous budgets, and they are often the ones that are making these decisions. But just by way of some numbers, since we are in the estimates, last year we spent about $35 million, which is about 10% of the actual amount that went out to clients on special needs. So there is some discretion, and I think by definition special needs pertains to exactly what the member is talking about. But it was more than that, because in addition to that, we spent about $17 million in employment support services, which is tailored to the individual client and trying to give them some sort of plan in order to get an education and get back in the workforce or go directly into the workforce. So between the two, that's $52 million, and